Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Heidinger. Thank you for joining the Adaptive Cards community call. So you found this call. We mentioned earlier on before the recording started that the calendar series had expired, so people will have to re-add it. The new series does not expire, so we hopefully won't have to do this reboot again. But if you have friends, colleagues that would find this interesting, you will have to kind of reshare the calendar link, aka.ms/adaptive cards community call. And we're still going. So if it fell off people's calendar and they thought we might have disappeared, we're still going. Second Thursday of every month at 9 a.m. Pacific time. We have some cool topics for today. I'll be doing a quick update on Adaptive Cards 1.3, which some of you have probably seen, but it's really, we're calling our input evolution update. So we've got some cool demos to show there. And then Tim Cadenbach, who has been a longtime fan, is going to show off some cooling and also really pushing the envelope on what you can do and just kind of, I like to say, just getting the wheels spinning on some things maybe outside the box that just really using adaptive cards for things we hadn't really seen. So Tim, thank you for joining us.
Yep. Thank you, Matt.
And so I'll just kind of dive right in. So the first one, once our power fan, Tomasz, joins, I think he'll be on shortly. He keeps up to speed on the Power Platform. He's kind of my main proxy, even though I do work at Microsoft. It's a huge company and it's hard to keep up on everything we're doing. So I actually find out about a lot of things from him. So supposedly Power Virtual Agents now supports adaptive cards, which I know comes up all the time. And I basically nudged the one person I talked to there. And that's really cool if that's true. What I wasn't clear on the tweet that he shared was if it's available or if they've announced it's part of their plan for their next update. So it's either one of those. It may be available literally right now, and we can kind of confirm that. Tim, maybe if you see him join,
he's not here yet.
We can confirm that, or if anyone else happens to know. But Power Virtual Agents is a really powerful platform for building virtual agents and support-like scenarios. And now adaptive card support is either there or at least part of their next release, which is a big addition.
As far as I understood, it's being rolled out right now. So they started rolling it out.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well. So that's really great stuff. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes and update everybody on Adaptive Cards 1.3. So that's our next point release that's adding a handful of nice features for really around inputs. And you can play with it yourself. I will show it right here. So what you're seeing, I've loaded up, this is a custom build of adaptivecards.io that has this new feature. So like I said, anyone can start playing with it. And you will just change your target version to 1.3. That's our upcoming release. Will be available maybe by the end of this month, possibly early August. And it's going to add a lot of great features around inputs. So let me give you an idea what that is. So previously, to build a card that had some inputs, you would typically do something like this. You would drag in a text block and say first name, and then you would drag in the input, and then maybe drag in a text block that was last name, and then drag in another input, and you'd set the placeholder. And really, you had this text block input, text block input. And that was what we had. Which is fine, but there are a handful of problems with that. Namely, a big one is accessibility and screen reader support. So because there's no association between this text block and this input, sighted users can visually see that, yeah, okay, this one follows this one, that's fine. But a screen reader software doesn't necessarily know that. So when a screen reader is helping someone fill in this input, all they see is something like placeholder text, and they lose that association with the two. So that's a big bummer, specifically around just making adaptive cards really accessible. It's also more verbose. It's more tedious to drag in these text blocks, style them the right way. And the final thing is, up until now, we've never been able to mark an input as required. And now we can simply by adding this required checkbox. So what I'm going to do is scratch this. We're going to build a card from scratch, or really, I guess I could just show you how easy it is to do this in the new 1.3 way. That's going to give you a whole bunch of advantages, which are a more succinct card. So if I delete these text blocks, what you'll see on all of our input types now is a label property, including choice set, number. All input types have a label, so I can just say label this first name, and I will label this last name. And that star just, that red star, that red asterisk just appeared there automatically. I didn't have to put that in, you'll notice. So it's filled in because I've marked this input as required. So a whole bunch of nice things just happened. It's just simpler. It's just a lot simpler. I've got an input, it's got a label, everything's nice and compact. That means I get free accessibility support. My card is now much more accessible for people using assistive technologies like screen readers. And I've got this free asterisk support in there that automatically gets added when I've marked this input as required. So if I toggle into preview mode, now I can drag in a button really quickly. And this will be called submit. And if I click on preview mode, that lets you kind of interact with your card rather than design it. And I can say Matt, and I try and submit this. And oops, hang on, there is a bug here. I have to give my all inputs need an ID. And sometimes I forget to do that. So now that I've given it an ID, it will behave properly. And it's turning red, focusing that input and saying that, I have to fill something in here. So it's preventing me from submitting this button. I can go a step further and add a user-friendly error message in here too. So I can say, please enter your last name. And now when I don't enter something, I get a friendly error message there. So a lot of advanced stuff. I just want to do a quick lap around this. You can do, for example, regular expression pattern matching for text inputs. With numbers, we now take advantage of the min and max. So if you say enter a number between 0 and 5, and I come in here and enter 50, you'll see it'll fail validation as long as maybe I'll just put age or something like that and give it a label like age. You can just see how much easier it is to build forms now just by clicking on an input, adding these labels, setting these min-max, marking it as required, and now it'll take in that min-max value as appropriate. So if I hit 50 there, you can see now there's just basic validation, and this is going to work across all of our SDKs, Android, iOS, JavaScript, .NET, all of them. So it's a pretty great evolution for those of you who are creating inputs and things. So that was a lap around that. I was going to show you quickly also how easy it is to convert this card into the new format. But hopefully you get it, and hopefully you want to try it yourself and can give us feedback on this. But I didn't want to take away time from what Tim has to show. So expect next month. I'm really hoping by next community call that we'll be able to roll this out to adaptivecards.io. And you'll be able to build cards in the designer. And then from there, we have to get it, the SDKs will be available. And then it'll take a little bit of time to get them into Teams and some of the apps that you expect this in. So even though the feature will be available on Adaptive Cards, it will take a little bit of time for them to roll out into the various platforms. So that's a lap around input validation and 1.3. Please stay tuned. We've got a lot of cool stuff to share with that in the future. So with that, Tim, I don't know if I need to switch back to the slides. Do you want me to just kind of hand it off to you at this point?
Yeah, you can. We don't really have any slides for that at all. So except for the second part, but for the first part, we don't have any slides. So that's totally fine. Thomas just joined, by the way, and said adaptive cards in Power BI are supposed to be arriving in October.
Okay, on the roadmap. Okay, good. I'm glad.
It's on the roadmap for October.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's already now official and without NDA. So yeah, hello everyone, by the way.
Perfect.
Hello.
So while Tim is taking over sharing, that's, by the way, hasn't loaded up yet, Tim.
No,
if this is your first call, just as a reminder, please keep the questions coming. We'll go through them during breaks. If you'd like to, we will do a dedicated Q&A at the end, but obviously fill them in the chat stream as you feel the need. And if you'd like to speak or clarify, just do the hand raising thing, and we'll try and take a pause. I like to keep these, pretty casual, pretty informal, and just give you access to myself and some of those of us on the team. So whatever you'd like to ask about or talk about, please feel free.
Yeah, my name is Tim Cadenbach, as Matt already explained at the beginning. Some of you might know me, I don't know. So I had a look at especially the tooling currently available for adaptive cards. I'm not sharing anything yet, Matt, so so we have the adaptive cards designer on the website, which is pretty much a drag and drop designer, which works fine, especially for, let's say, non-code people, so people who actually just want to design a card, and people like really designers who make cards and all that. I, for myself, love to build cards in JSON because I'm a developer and I'm actually a lot faster building a card in JSON than using some drag and drop designer. So I had a look at the existing tooling around that, and there was literally nothing. So we have a few extensions in Visual Studio Code today, but with the extensions we have in the marketplace, that was pretty much just to view an adaptive card in Visual Studio Code. It was never really meant to be an editor. It's actually named adaptive card viewer, so it was never meant to be a full editing experience. And we actually decided to take that a step further and really get some nice adaptive card editing experience into Visual Studio Code. And here we are.
And can you do one just Control+ in there just to make it just a tiny bit bigger?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have the extension installed in my Visual Studio Code. I'm just the workspace I'm currently working on is something that's coming sooner or later. It's something for the bot framework, especially for adaptive cards. Nothing to talk about yet, but that's what I currently have opened. And I know that somewhere here I have quite a few adaptive cards in there, and I don't really want to search for them, but I know I want to edit them. So what we did with the extension is we have that new shiny adaptive cards button here. When you click on it, it shows you all cards you have in your workspace. So it scans your currently open workspace for all adaptive cards. And it just lists them in the tree view. You can just open the card and you directly see the card rendered. And you don't have to search for cards in your workspace. You can just go here and to edit the cards you want. It's as simple as in the designer. So it's working like you would expect it. You change things and the card is changed. So you can author the card pretty easily. What we also added is what the old extension didn't support is templating. As you can see, this is just a card template. We're using all the fancy placeholders everywhere. And to even make that easier for you, you can always expand the cards. And then you can say, I actually want to edit the template, or I actually want to edit the data. So sample data for the template to make it easier to edit it. In this case, we want to add a message, for example. That's what we have here. So, and we can add sample data as we want to make it easier to edit the card. Another thing we added was some JSON snippets to make it even more easy to edit cards. So whenever you want to add something, you can just open the snippet to add a new text box, for example, and add a new fact set maybe. So you can this way you
in
can.
That text one, did it put the cursor right in the text so you could just start typing that?
It did, yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's neat. That's a cool snippet.
So this way you can actually easily, even if it's JSON, you can easily also author cards just in VS Code. You can add sample data for your cards, and you see everything straight away. Another thing we added is that some people build cards for Microsoft Teams, and other people build cards for maybe Cortana or Windows Timeline or whatever. And in the current designer, we have all the host configs, and you can just pick the one you need. We have the same in the extension. When you go to the extension settings, you can go to the Adaptive Cards one and just pick a different host config. That's if we just pick Microsoft Teams Lite, pick another card, then you can see it changed the host config straight away. Maybe if you prefer that, you can change that. So you can change that to whatever you like, really. At this point, you cannot add custom host configs, but we definitely want to add that. So yeah, that's cards in your workspace. You can edit them and all that. Another thing is what you can see here. That is cards stored in the CMS. So that's connected to Matt's own CMS instance. As you know, we've been talking about that a lot in the last 3 or so community calls, I think. We have that Adaptive Cards CMS, which is sort of available, but you can only host it on your own Azure instance right now. But you can, store cards online and edit them and share them and reuse them from anywhere you like, really, from the CMS. And Visual Studio Code also lets you edit cards directly from the CMS. Right now, you can open any card. All these cards are not stored in my workspace. That's coming from a database, so that's all stored in my CMS. As you can see, the formatting is a bit off, so it's a bit rough right now. But yeah, that's still something we need to work on. But that's all cards I have nowhere in my workspace. That's all coming from my CMS. And you can edit them here as well. And when you save them, it saves the cards back to the CMS. And you can even see, so all the green ones are cards currently live and published in the CMS. All the yellow ones are draft cards, which are not published yet in the CMS. So did I forget some? Yeah, that's pretty much what we did for VS Code. That was pretty fast now, I think. So,
well, what is the so basically what you're saying is when the first one, the Workspace cards, you opened up, the extension is basically scanning your open project. Yeah. It's scanning the file system for things that look like adaptive cards, and it's just and it's pulling out the template and allowing you to very easily edit the template and the data and preview the card at the same time. Yeah,
exactly that. So when you I can actually show you that. Let me just change that back. That's quite annoying me. Sorry. So when you, let's say we open another workspace, let's take this one for example. When you go here, you see it takes a little bit, and it goes through all the files I have in my workspace and then returns all the cards. So it pretty much scans through all JSON files I have in my workspace, validates the card, the JSON files, if it's actually an adaptive card, and if it's an adaptive card, it adds that to the tree view. And even with the data, so you usually only have the template stored. You don't have the data stored as well. So the moment you click on data, it creates a new file with the same name, just with .data.json. And so when you add sample data, you can even commit it into GitHub for other people or whatever.
Cool. And so what is the status of this? Will it be available? I know, I'm trying to figure out how we can publish it under like the Microsoft account, but are you feeling like, so the code's available on GitHub. If you had to guess, when could people start trying this out?
Well, I would say, well, it's technically available right now. So you can go to GitHub, you can check out the source code and just run it locally. So it's in the official Adaptive Cards repository. There's a folder source tools VS Code. That's the whole source code for the extension. So anyone who wants to do it that way can freely just do it. I guess we have it published as maybe as a beta version in the store, by the weekend, I guess, because it's really just minor things to do. So it's in a pretty good state. There's some edges here where we have to fix something, but it's in a pretty good state right now, and it will be available pretty soon. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. And the CMS, I know we quickly kind of went through that. There's a lot to cover there. It's still in a really early preview. So if you aren't familiar with what we're calling the adaptive card CMS, or sometimes we call it card author services, it's a set of services.
Do you want to maybe quickly show that again or something? Or
yeah, we totally can. I wish I had more of an update. We are still working on it. Like Tim mentioned, it's in an early preview still. The plan is you'll be able to again host these services yourself. So you will host this as either a Docker container or something else, and then it will be available to your company. You'll be able to log in. And what it helps you do is quickly design and share cards within your organization. So I can hit save and I can give this card a name and maybe a tag or whatever. And it's a web-based tool for managing all your cards. And I can publish this card, which then makes it available to consume from a backend app. So this is really the design time experience in a web editor. And then Tim, if you want to show, if you'd have to actually share again, what I believe you're showing is that your VS Code can connect to that same CMS endpoint. The CMS is, we took the term from content management system, we kind of called it like a card management system, but it's really just a way to store your cards in a consistent way with a consistent set of REST APIs that let you fetch cards, create them, update them. And Tim, you use those APIs to have VS Code connect to it, I believe, right?
Yes. Yeah. So this is actually the same card you had in your you showed us there, and here's actually the card.
Oh, look at that test card too. Yeah, how looking it? Cool.
So it's loading the cards directly from the CMS. You can edit the cards, and the cards are getting stored back. So the idea is that the CMS sort of acts as the middle point where you have your card stored. So I guess eventually you might be able to go to Power Automate and say, hey, I want to use a card from my CMS. And here in VS Code, these cards are actually published right now, but we might also add functionality here so you can right-click, publish this card, or share the card. Here is that as a designer, you sort of work in the web world, so you use your fancy drag and drop things to design cards, and developers can just go the JSON route and edit cards directly in JSON and publish them as well.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it too, with the CMS kind of being that central hub. And absolutely, it is our plan that you'll be able to pull from those, just this list that you see, the cards there in VS Code. You'll be able to get that same list from Power Automate and really access your different card types and then use them in your flows however you see fit. So we don't have any updates on when that'll be available. But we are still working on it. I'm really hoping maybe by next month, but more like towards fall, we'll have it in a ready to preview state. But again, you'll be kind of hosting it yourself at least for this first release.
Yeah.
So that was a look at what I guess I actually kind of like the name, Adaptive Card Studio. So that'll really help you manage your Workspace cards and your eventually CMS cards. Now, you said maybe this will be available this weekend. Even that I feel like is a little optimistic, but maybe next week it'll be available.
Well, the VS Code extension as such will be available next week, definitely.
Yeah.
We probably disable the CMS part because no one's gonna use it without the CMS.
Right.
But editing Workspace cards will be available next week. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So you had another demo queued up. You want to walk us through that?
I had a little demo queued up. Yeah. So the other thing I want to talk about is I'm always trying to push adaptive cards as a technology always a little bit further. So when I was working for Teamwork, I was actually using adaptive cards in, for example, Electron apps we built, or I was doing just more with adaptive cards than just using them for the usual Microsoft Teams app, for example. So when you ask someone, hey, what is adaptive cards today? I would say that a lot of people probably say, oh yeah, that's the way you build Microsoft Teams bots. And some people might say, hey, yeah, that's something you can use in Power Automate. While that is absolutely true, so adaptive card as a technology is built by Microsoft and obviously also to be used in Microsoft products. It's a lot more. So you're free to use it anywhere you like. It's the technology is open source. The whole renderer is open source. You can just go to GitHub, download it. There's NPM packages. You can start using it in your own apps. There's no problem at all to do that. It works in any HTML, CSS environment. There's a lot of pre-made SDKs and all that available. There's companies who already support cards, which is like Cisco, WebEx Teams, for example, and also Teamwork with quite a few things they do. They also support cards. So if we, let me share my screen again. So if we look at that, for example, again, so the VS Code app, the whole view here on the right side in VS Code, that's nothing special for Microsoft in a way. That is just pretty much an iframe. So the card we render here is pretty much just a small mini website with a card being rendered. That means you can pretty much render adaptive cards anywhere you like. In this example, what I want to show you is some people might have seen that before. I was talking about that briefly in the blog post. So I built a really small, let's call it demo app, pretty much to show what you could, in theory, do with adaptive cards. It's pretty small. We only have 2 views. I show you that in running in a minute, but we only have 2 views. As you can see, there's pretty much no source, no code. There's no input. We don't have any UI elements outside of positioning things. So there's really nothing here. And if we run this app and start that, takes a second. So we have that. It's nothing special. It's just an app showing a few example people. You can add a user. You can add a new user. You can edit users. The key here is that everything you see here, except the borders and positioning and the navigation, is actually an adaptive card. So every person here is, well, that here is one adaptive card. If you edit a user, the whole input field here is again an adaptive card. And when you click on edit, that again is just an adaptive card. And the interesting part here is that it's actually in total 2 adaptive cards I had to make to get that done. If we go back to VS Code, here's actually the two cards that make this make the whole app. As you can see, that's the person card. Here we have the card to edit and create a person. Because adaptive cards have that placeholder, and you can set a value. As long as the value is null, the placeholder is shown, and that allows us to use a card for edit and create. Because when you create something, the value is just null, and the placeholder is shown. When you edit something, the actual data is shown. And this way, we can actually build apps, and we can easily change the UI around. For example, I actually want to add a new field here. We want to, no idea. We have the sample data actually available here. For example, all the people always have preferred language. So we also want to show the preferred language of the person. If we go here, Maybe we should actually save that.
It was in there. It was under the "This is my job." It showed ENUS under there.
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah. So yeah, this way, if you build apps using adaptive card for the UI, you can do a lot of things. You don't have to change the UI, like you don't have to build any fancy CSS stuff, because adaptive cards, especially with the host config editing, just blend nicely into any UI, and you can build a whole app by just using adaptive cards for all the input fields and for pretty much your whole UI, especially with all the features coming in 1.3 with the input validation. I can even add input validation to the creation form. So it actually makes it pretty easy to build full apps just using adaptive cards. The even more interesting part is now in that case, I have my cards obviously stored with my source code, but the cards here, for example, could easily come from a database or from an API call or from wherever you like. Really, it's just JSON, and in especially JavaScript frameworks, you can load JSON from anywhere you want to, and that means we could, for example, take that whole UI, store it in a database, and allow a user to edit. Any user can edit the UI the way he wants to, and even any user can have his own UI. So even if you want to build customizable layouts for whatever you want, then adaptive cards might actually be really helpful here. We have another really small example and that's the same here. So we have that website madewithcards.io, which just has a couple of sample cards. So we have a lot of just card samples you can freely use. Again, this is just a normal website, and we render adaptive cards here. So you can. This is not made by Microsoft. It's made by me. It's just a sample page, and we also list a couple of tools for adaptive cards. But again, it's only an HTML page written in ViewJS, and you can render cards as you want here. So the line under everything is yes. Adaptive cards are made for Microsoft especially, but you can use them any way you like in all your apps, whatever. Just try things. It's all available, all the NPM packages, so you can pretty much just try whatever you want and just build something with it.
Awesome. And so is that stuff also, was that repo you had open there with just showing how the Vue.js integration and stuff, is that available as well?
That's let me check that again. I think that's an open source repository on GitHub. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Tim, for sharing all that. What I'd like to do now is just provide a link to a couple resources. We'll have a couple others. I don't know. Hopefully, we put the link to just going back, see if we see it. Okay, perfect. Yes, there's a way to play with input validation at the link up there. So a bunch of links to get started. One call out I saw in the chat, completely forgot to mention while I was demoing input validation. Earlier this week, we did release adaptive card templating 1.0. So it's out of preview. You can use it in production. You can expect full support. You can expect updates to it. It's available for .NET and JavaScript. And if you haven't used templating, and you're using adaptive cards, you should be looking at templating. It will save you a ton of time to write these cards, fill them with data. You will have to either have some kind of .NET backend or a Node.js backend. The templates basically have to be applied and data bound before they arrive into a client. I saw through the chat there were questions on, when will templating be available in Teams? And the hope is that down the road, you'll be able to send just a template. The data could be in Teams, it could be in your repo, and then the data binding will happen directly on the client. That is part of our longer term vision. We will have more to share on that in the next year. But for now, you can at least take advantage of templates and process them server side before they arrive on Teams, and actually use them today in Teams and Outlook and things like that. And Tim, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I want to add, I can't stress enough pretty much that you actually really should consider templating. So I'm quite often I'm just looking at adaptive cards things on Stack Overflow. And you see quite often people who build really complex adaptive cards in C# as objects and then have questions because some of the newer features are not working. And all the things we are working on with adaptive expressions and templating as such and input validation and all that, that's not going to work with C# objects. So you have to use templating pretty much to get that working properly. So if you're still building adaptive cards in code as objects, you're pretty much missing out on a lot of new features.
Yeah, and templating is an optional thing. So use what's working for you for sure. Try it out. If you were waiting for it to leave preview, now is your perfect chance to get started. Like I said, we shipped it a couple days ago. So definitely check out templating. There's tons of samples on adaptivecards.io. We did have a Build 2020 session, the all virtual conference back in May. That'll get you up to speed if this is one of your first calls. Tim showed madewithcards.io. That's our community supported website showing samples and things that Tim is the main driver of that at this point. But I think the long-term aspiration is that's our kind of community hub for all things adaptive cards. So check out all those resources. There's also a handful of Microsoft 365 developer community calls. So this is the adaptive cards one. Thank you for joining. There's the graph, there's a Teams one, SharePoint, Power Apps. Check out those other calls. And with that, I'll just kind of turn it over to Q&A. And if there's anything in the chat I missed, I'll try and scroll through. It's hard to scroll back on the chat and then monitor any current questions. So, we have a relatively, small group in here today. So you can either raise your hand if you'd like to unmute, or just, if there's a lull, feel free to just unmute. But I'll scroll through the chat. And if we missed your question, please feel free to just paste it again, because I'll scroll back and see. But yeah, if you have any questions on anything adaptive cards, what you saw today, or just anything in general, please feel free. Vardaman, did you want to go ahead and ask a question?
Yeah. So I think I might have missed something you said. So adaptive cards templating 1.0. Can we use that in Teams right now? I think I missed what you said there.
The templating? Yeah, so templating does work in Teams as long as you apply the template, or what we call sometimes expand the template before it arrives to Teams. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So as long as you generate the adaptive cards JSON and send it to Teams, it would work.
Right. Yes.
And the templates and stuff. Okay. And that's out of preview, that approach, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Great. And we announced a whole bunch of things. So we've been talking about templating for a year now. And if you follow through on the chat, there's this new topic. Tim mentioned it. We're calling it adaptive expressions. And it's a standard JSON-based expression library, very similar, if not identical, a superset of what you see in things like Power Automate, that we're going to, over time, allow some really powerful expressions to exist in the templates themselves. And these are things like, the stock example is one I always like to go to. Let me actually just see if I can share that really quickly so folks get an idea of what the heck an expression is. So if you go to adaptivecards.io, well, I'm on this one, but you could go to adaptivecards.io, click on samples, and go to the stock update. It's a pretty complex card, to be honest. We basically check, we write these expressions here, and there are these declarative expressions that can do things like conditionals. They can do formatting, so you want to maybe round this number with 2 decimal places. A handful of just functions that you would expect a template to do based on the data. And so we're calling that layer, that expression layer, adaptive expressions. And what the magic that happens on all these expressions and the value that we're providing is that you can write this expression once in your adaptive card payload, and we will be able to evaluate that expression natively on any platform, including Python, Java, .NET, JavaScript. So we're basically writing and maintaining expression evaluators on every platform that adaptive cards supports. So long term, you will be able to just send a template to Teams, to somewhere, and have the data maybe provided separately where that evaluation happens directly on the client. And that opens up a whole bunch of possibilities for more interactivity in the cards, things like cascading dropdowns, things like just a little bit more expressiveness in the cards. So the lead work that needs to happen is we feel good about our expression language at the JSON layer. What we're working on now is those expression validators, or engines, if you will, on those other platforms.
Okay, great.
Sure.
Check it out. Thanks.
So David said there appear to be some limits on the number of controls on the card, or at least some types of controls. Is there anywhere to find those limits? So there are not any official limits on adaptive cards. What you may be hitting if you're sending cards into Teams, Teams has a 25 kilobyte limit on the entire payload, the activity payload. So you may be hitting size limits at that layer. I've heard talks of them, like, so I'm on the adaptive cards team, not the Teams team. I don't know if anyone from Teams is on here. If they are, feel free to fill in. We've talked about, I know they've talked about potentially raising that limit. I don't think anything's been announced or they've committed to anything, but you may be hitting that. If you're not hitting it in Teams and you're hitting it elsewhere, you may have found a bug, especially if you're putting in thousands of things. We never really tested the upper bounds of 1,000 input controls, but there's really no limit at the adaptive cards layer. You may be hitting it at an app layer like Teams or Outlook. And if that didn't answer your question, feel free to just add more. But I have to imagine you might be hitting that 25K limit.
That 25K limit is actually something which is quite common. I think Power Apps has the same. You get to that 25K limit quite often, but then again, you have quite a large card if you get there. So that is quite a lot for JSON. So you can put a lot of JSON into 25K. So. Mm-hmm.
At this point, too, I'll also just put out there, Tomasz, I was going to send you an email, but there's no special treatments in adaptive cards. So if anyone feels like, Tim, thank you so much for presenting this. I like to engage with our community. I think that's the point of these community calls. So if anyone has something they'd want to share similar to what Tim just did, we like to keep it, like I said, pretty casual. It's pretty low stress. Tomasz, you've been blogging a lot, you've been tweeting a lot, making YouTube videos on stuff that I don't even really understand. I think the RVA, whatever, I've never heard of that before. So if you'd like to present something on next month's call or a future call, please, anyone should feel free to reach out to me. You can find me at matt.heidinger@microsoft.com. And yeah, if you have anything you'd like to share on adaptive cards, let me know and we'll see what we can do about getting folks sharing what they're working on.
All right, so I will write to you then.
Okay. Perfect.
And that's a yes, he will do the next month and talk about it. Or it's not. I actually have one question because that came up a couple of times on Stack Overflow, and maybe it's interesting for some people here. So when you work with cards for like Microsoft Teams, or especially when you work on cards in bot framework, you have that card syntax for templating as you have it in the designer. But especially in flows, Power Automate seems to have its own syntax, at least partially. Are there any plans to ever consolidate that, or will that always be like it is right now?
The definite hope is that they play nicely together. And that includes a handful of other places. I don't have anything officially to announce, but that is definitely the plan, that these languages converge. I know our expression layer is a superset of it, but there's slightly different tokens to activate into expression mode. So I think it is a little clumsy right now, but the long-term hope for sure is that, and I guess I can't really share some other things, but there's other places where adaptive cards will integrate with a platform similar to Power Automate that has a expression layer, and we're doing what we can to make sure they adapt or play nicely together. Because I do understand that it is a bit of a, you kind of have to know some tricks at this point. And are you in the template layer? Are you in Power Automate's layer? And we have a little bit of work to do, but it's definitely the long-term aspiration that these feel very natural.
Yeah.
So I don't see any other questions, we can probably call it. We got, what, 9 minutes left. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Tim, thank you again for sharing. We'll see you again. What is it? August 13th, I think, is the next call. August 13th at 9 a.m. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining, and we will catch you next time.